Hi guys, HT Movies here. Today I will show you American horror thriller movie from 2016 titled Cabin Fever. Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie starts with a man hunting a rabbit for his dog. When he returns to his dog, he finds that his dog is dead. The dog has some kind of skin disease and there's blood all over the place and some of it splatters onto the man too. Next scene we see a group of friends traveling in a jeep to a remote hilly area for a holiday. They have rented a cabin in the woods for a week-long vacation. These 5 people consist of Jeff, Marcy, Karen, Bert, and Paul. On their way to the cabin, the group stops at Pretty's general store to shop for supplies. There's a kid sitting on a bench outside the shop wearing a creepy rabbit mask. Paul goes ahead and greets him. The kid suddenly bites his hand and it starts bleeding. His father Tommy comes out instantly and scolds his child Dennis. He then suggests to Paul that he should wash his hands while Jeff and the child's father argue over the incident. The group wanders around and looks through some of the jars placed on the porch while Paul washes his hand from a hose. The owner appears on the porch and warns them about a skin disease known as Lyme disease. He tells them to be careful around the woods as a group of hikers got pretty sick last week. Tommy comes out yelling at Bert for stealing a Snickers bar from his store. All of them quickly get in the jeep and drive away. Karen uses the first aid box to patch up Paul's hand. Soon, they arrived at the cabin alongside the lake. They explore the cabin and find out there's no Wi-Fi or reception of any kind. Meanwhile, Jeff and Marcy go up the stairs and find a bedroom. Paul goes out of the cabin to look at the lake when Bert comes out holding an assault rifle. He wanted to practice his video gaming skills, so he bought a rifle for the vacation. While checking out the rifle, Bert accidentally shoots his rifle but misses Paul. Bert then lights up a campfire and goes into the forest to catch something to eat. Meanwhile, Karen is taking pictures at the lake and trying to post them on social media when Paul approaches her. They both then go swimming in the lake. After swimming, they lay on a piece of wood floating in the lake as Bert ventures into the woods to practice his weapon skills. He encounters the hunter and shoots him. He has some kind of disease and his skin is bloody. He asks for help but Bert gets scared and runs back to the cabin. When he gets back, he doesn't talk much to Marcy and Jeff and goes inside. At night, the friends are sitting around a campfire and sharing stories when a stranger with a dog comes around and introduces himself as Grim and his dog Dr. Mambo. He has a bag of weed with him which he promises to share with everyone if they become friendly to him. They all have to leave the campfire as the rain is about to start. While at the cabin, the friends are sitting in the lounge having fun when the door knocks. Jeff opens the door and sees the hunter guy with bloody skin asking for help. The guy recognizes Bert in the cabin. He gets scared that they'll all get sick. Bert immediately closes the door and refuses to help. The man gets into the jeep and locks the doors. He starts to vomit blood all over the car. Bert shoots the car tire in order to scare the guy out and Paul smashes the windows. Marcy throws gasoline onto the guy and he starts screaming. His belly skin has holes in it and has eaten up by the disease. Jeff gets a log of wood from the fireplace and lights the guy on fire. The burning man runs away screaming at the top of his lungs. After the horrible incident, the group establishes that it was all in self-defense. Karen suggests they should tell the police about it. They decide to fix the car in the morning and then report the accident. The following morning, the guys are discussing their plan when they start arguing. They all blame each other for damaging the car. Marcy gets mad and goes to get help alone. She takes the boat out into the lake. Meanwhile at the house, Karen is in great distress about last night. Paul tries to comfort her and offers her a glass of tap water. She drinks the water and comes down. Marcy gets back from the lake and rejoins Jeff and Bert. While at the cabin, Paul looks out the window and finds a sheriff car outside. The sheriff, Winston, puts a gun to Paul's face and scares him. She investigates the party they had last night and wants to talk about the incident. Paul explains that some guy with a disease attacks them. Karen comes out of the house to ask if everything's alright. Winston sends her back inside. She then heads back and advises Paul to continue having the party. After she left, Paul and Bert start cleaning the car with wet towels. Paul doesn't think Winston will report them. While washing the car, Grim's dog appears behind Bert. Marcy comes out with the rifle in her hands and scares the dog away. After that, they all discusses their next steps. They decide to tell Winston the truth and get out of this place as soon as they can. Karen feels nauseous and goes to her room. After a bit, Paul follows her and finds her laying on the bed. Karen invites her to the bed and they both lay down there. Outside the cabin, Bert is fixing the car tire accompanied by Jeff, who is holding the rifle. When the same dog makes an appearance again, Jeff shots Grimm's dog, but it doesn't even flinch. Meanwhile, Paul and Karen are snuggling. Paul caresses her hair and moves his head down to her legs. When Karen starts squirming and stops Paul, he takes his hand out and it has blood all over it. They removed the blanket and see that Karen's legs are all covered in blood and have a skin disease. Paul calls for help. The whole group gathers and is shocked to see the disease on Karen's legs. Fearing the chance of disease spreading, Bert panics and gets everyone out of the room. He locks Karen inside and assures her that they'll get help soon. After that, they all search each other for any signs of possible infection. The four of them argue whether they should quarantine Karen or not. They place a mattress inside the shed and promised her that one of them will be at the door all the time. Paul gets tired of waiting, so he leaves the group to search for help. Paul starts to look for any signs of life. Paul hears the growling sounds of the dog and starts shouting at the dog. Meanwhile, Marcy brings a plate of food and offers it to Karen. She asks Marcy to be left alone. While searching for people, Paul comes across a minivan and peeks through the side window. A woman holding a shotgun comes from behind and questions Paul why he's looking inside the van. Paul is startled and breathlessly tries to explain why he is here. A man in underwear comes out of the van. They scare Paul away. After a while, Paul comes back to the shed. He and Bert go back inside the cabin. While in the house, Marcy has made dinner but nobody's in a mood to eat. They all start to quarrel and Jeff claims that any of them could have the disease. They all agree that they shouldn't be fighting amongst themselves. Paul glances out the window and sees the dog outside. Dr. Mambo's legs are all covered in blood and it has a hungry look inside its eyes. The dog goes for the boat shed's door and starts barking up the door. Then, suddenly the dog disappears. The group gets out of the house to search for the dog. There are bloody claw marks on the door of the shed. Bert knocks on the door but Karen doesn't respond. They keep searching for the dog. The next morning Marcy and Paul go to check up on Karen. When they open the door, they see her all covered in blood with rotten skin. Bert fixes the car's engine and starts it up. Marcy and Paul get Karen up to get her in the car while Bert starts to cough blood. Jeff refuses to get in the car with Karen. Karen also starts coughing blood and sprays some of it on Jeff. They started to argue again. Bert closes the Jeep door and drives away to get help alone. Jeff comes back to the cabin to wash his face and drinks tap water. He decides to leave the cabin and live somewhere in the woods away from the disease until help arrives. Paul cleans the cabin and throws away the contaminated clothes into the lake. After all the chaos, Marcy and Paul are left alone in the cabin. Marcy's scared that they will all die here. Paul hugs her to comfort her. Meanwhile, Bert arrives back at the Pretty's general store and asks Tommy for help. He goes inside to call a doctor when Dennis bites Bert's hand as well. Tommy comes outside and gets mad at Bert for infecting his child too. He calls Finster to fetch a gun. Finster comes with a shotgun in hand. Bert gets in the car and runs away. The old man advises Tommy to kill all of the infected people to stop the spread of the disease. Back to cabin. Karen barely breathing and gasping for air when Paul brings her a glass of water. Meanwhile Tommy along with Bailey and Finster starts following Bert's Jeep. At the house, Paul comes to Marcy's room and sees her scarred back. He decides to find Jeff and leave the cabin on foot. On the contrary, Bert is in trouble as Tommy is trying to ram his Jeep while Bailey shoots at it. Bert runs out of fuel and leaves the vehicle to run into the woods. Marcy decides to take a bath and clean herself. The scars on her back started to ooze blood out of them. Her skin is also infected by now. Paul goes by the lake to search for Jeff. Suddenly the Burning Man from the first night appears out of the lake and grabs Paul's legs. The guy tries to drown him but Paul successfully breaks free and gets out of the lake. He figures out that the virus is in the lake. Bert is running away from the shooters in the woods. To throw them off the track, Bert leaves a fake trail for them to follow, and he then heads for the cabin. Marcy, all covered in blood, gets out of the house. She gets down to the ground and calls Jeff for help. When Dr. Mambo appears, the dog barks at Marcy then rushes toward her and tears her body to pieces. Paul, hearing her cries, comes back to the cabin. He finds blood all over the place with bits and remains of Marcy everywhere. He then hears Karen's screams coming from the boat shed. He gets the rifle and opens the door to the shed and sees the dog eating away at Karen's arm. He shoots and kills the dog. Karen begs Paul to kill her as well. Paul gathers the courage to finish off his friend. When the gun jams up, he then picks up a shovel and hits Karen really hard on the neck, but she doesn't die. He picks up a can of gasoline and throws fuel at her. Karen screams while tightly holding on to her cell phone. He then lights up a flare and sets fire to Karen. After coming out of the shed, Paul sees Bert behind him on the floor. Bert tries to warn him about the guys from the store when suddenly Tommy comes from behind and shoots Bert in the skull. Paul immediately takes out his rifle and turns the safety off. He then shoots all of them and kills them in one single swoop. Paul then finds the Jeep in the truck on the road and takes the truck to get help. On his way, he takes a look at his hand. He has gotten the disease as well. He panics and hits the truck into a tree. He gets out of the vehicle. Suddenly there's a spark and the truck blows up. Paul walks and finds Winston partying in the woods with 2 other people. He confronts her as to why she didn't send help yesterday. Winston's radio starts speaking and there's news from the sheriff's department about the incident at the cabin. The sheriff orders her to shoot and kill any outsiders on site. She takes out her gun and points it at Paul, but Winston decides not to shoot him. She tells him about a shortcut that leads to the main road. Paul takes the path and gets lost. There's no road there. He starts crying and falls to the ground in disbelief. The next morning, Jeff comes out to check the cabin. His eyes can't believe it as he finds everybody dead at the cabin. He looks at his palm and is shocked to see that he's got the infection as well. Suddenly, a bullet hits Jeff and kills him. That's Winston holding a sniper nearby. In the end, Paul dead in the woods, and the police take in custody all the dead bodies. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you can watch more video like this. Thanks for watching this video until the end, and see you in the next video.